Kia ora, hello, I'm Philip Duncan. It is Thursday, the 18th of September. Thank you for joining me as we take a look at the weekend weather and the outlook for next week. And if you're sick of the wind and want some warmer weather, I might have some good news. It's not necessarily locked in for everyone, but we do see some warmer days on the way, as well as still some windy stuff. But compared to the previous month, some of those windy days aren't quite as intense or as widespread. So there's a little bit of good news throughout some of the rubbish weather that some of you are getting tired of. Let's kick off with the satellite lightning map. You can see thunderstorms moving along the west coast. A lot of energy overnight this morning in the southwest corner. Some of that spreading up the west coast. A couple of those heavy showers moving around Southland as well. Plenty of thunderstorms in the Tasman Sea overnight, but as you can see, towards the end of the animation, a lot of those disappear. So we may still see a few heavy showers and downpours as this front moves over the North Island today, and there's a burst of windy weather with it as well. The other feature, the southerly change, you can kind of see this wintry look down here in the southern part of the map. That is a sign of that polar change moving through. And yes, the polar airflow is going to go nationwide for a time. Let's have a look at the situation this evening. This is the Misery Index. Great for farmers because it puts into two colours the two extreme sets of temperatures. Red, 30 degrees and above, so we don't have to worry about that in New Zealand at the moment. Blue, 0 degrees and below. So you can see that as colder weather moving up through the hills, mountains, ranges, but even getting lower down as we go through tonight, because high pressure nearby is going to help the winds clear away, and with the cold air and high pressure, that means frosty weather coming through. But we've got windy stuff going ahead of it all. So let's start with the wind map. This is for noon today, Thursday. So as these windy nor'westers carry on through from the top of the South Island right up to about East Cape, the areas in purple, the darker shading here through the hills, mountains, ranges, those are the areas most likely to get the strongest gusts, and obviously those winds bouncing over parts of Waited Upper as well. We've also got a strong nor'wester coming in around Auckland. It's not really in the damaging area, but some of those gusts just getting up to that power cut level. Let's have a look at the frosty weather. So frosts come in to the South Island overnight tonight, going into Friday. Frosty conditions expanding northwards. A bit of a breeze around Banks Peninsula, parts of Canterbury, and some cloud may just be limiting that frosty stuff. And as we go into Saturday, a bit of easing maybe in some of the coastal parts of the South Island, but the North Island gets a chance of frosty conditions right up as far north as Waikato and Bay of Plenty. And if frost matter to you, please download the Weather Watch New Zealand app. We've got paid frost alerts that you can set. And for some of you, that's a big deal. Gardeners, kiwi fruit growers, that's why I chose Te Puke here, showing just the potential of a frost, but 0 degrees as the overnight low. It just depends on if there's a breeze or cloud hanging around, but it does look like there's a chance of a frost on Saturday morning, not so much on Saturday night. Typical spring weather, bouncing up and down with the temperatures. So let's make sense of it. Here is noon Friday. The high is moving closer to the top of the country. The polar airflow coming through all the way up to Auckland, Coromandel Peninsula. So really south of that line, that's where we're seeing the chance of frosts once the wind and clouds and showers clear away. So there are plenty of showers around the North Island. The eastern side will be coldest with those winds straight off the sea, and might even be a light dusting of snow on the mountains and ranges as well. But you can see the clearer skies in the South Island while you are seeing the frosts. As we go into Saturday now, it's the North Island's turn to be under the high pressure zone, so lighter winds, that higher risk of a frost, especially central areas and leaning to the east, as long as you don't have a breeze. But by lunchtime, there may well be a nor'wester starting to kick in, both islands, and that pushes the polar airflow back southwards again, unless you're over in the Chatham Islands. Cold start for you. But the nor'westers are going to pick up on Saturday, and that's the next sort of severe weather risk we've got. Our neighbours over in Tasmania getting a blast of west to southwesterlies and polar airflow, that polar air coming back in for them. So the next surge of windy weather overnight Saturday going into Sunday morning, it starts around Fiordland, and then it sort of spreads up through the Southern Alps. Canterbury may be more exposed here. It's further in towards the mountains. It's not widespread for everybody across Canterbury, but around the mountains and ranges, you're seeing some very strong gusts, potentially exceeding 130 kilometres an hour. Not as windy in the North Island, although through the Central Plateau, Mount Taranaki area, and around Cook Strait and Wellington, obviously windy weather through those spots. And this will be moving northwards as we go through the day. By noon Sunday, you can see what I mean, the windy weather moving up the country. So yes, another burst of severe gales, possibly damaging here and there around New Zealand, with heavy west coast rain, some thunderstorms, and then that polar airflow coming back in, turning some of that rain to snow, up in the mountains that is. So you've got the windy nor'westers in central New Zealand and moving up the country. But at the same time, I mentioned at the start, some of you pretty sick of the cold weather. We are seeing subtropical winds coming down around the North Island, maybe brushing the South Island. And even if you don't have the subtropical portion, you've got a westerly out of Australia. So it's not too bad temperature-wise. And as we go into Monday, no great change. The wet weather slides slowly up the country. It's only a narrow area of wet weather, large dry areas for most places, but it's worth monitoring this wet weather because it's connecting up with the tropics or subtropics. So it brings in a bit more moisture, and the high pressure zone that's leaving us slows it all down, which means a narrow area of rain might cause a rain warning to be issued. So we'll be watching that closely. The northwest or the upper corner of the South Island, most exposed. Still a bit windy on Monday, not as bad, probably not into the damaging portion of the winds, but still a bit windy. And the next cold change surges up around Tasmania. And look at that, by Tuesday, in fact, in the early hours of Tuesday morning, that polar airflow goes right up into Brisbane. So they'll be feeling a temperature drop, frosty weather going a long way northwards for them. That's ahead of a very large high pressure zone moving into Australia. So that may well move towards us at some point. But as we get to Tuesday, that narrow line of wet weather moves further into the North Island, held up by the high pressure zone out here to the east. But it's also that high that's pulling down the subtropical airflow. So we'll have to look at that closely. Monday, Tuesday, there's still a chance of some rain warnings, even though overall that's not looking like a huge amount of rain. It just depends on how slow moving it is. And then we get to Wednesday, and that polar airflow looked like it was going to zip over towards us, but it gets dragged back down again. And we've got high pressure, low pressure, and here is that big high coming into Australia. But look at this map. Look at the mixture of low pressure, high, low, high, in a perfect line latitude-wise. So that is showing you that we are into spring. I mean, it looks a lot like that. As we get into summer, high pressure zones tend to join together, and that's when we get our extended dry spells. But at this time of the year, the lows can punch through between them. That's bringing us our big swings in temperatures, because you end up with a subtropical northerly on one end of a high, and then the other one dredges up a southerly. And so it's all about the big highs as far as the temperature swings. But as far as the wet weather is concerned, it's all about the lows. And we'll be monitoring what goes on next week. There is a sign or a chance there of some heavy rain being subtropical related and coming down to us. But if these two highs even just start to merge together, that low won't have much of a chance. So we are seeing in the next week milder winds coming down over especially the North Island. We are still getting severe winds and polar airflows in the mix, but I think we might start to see a few more days that are just leaning a bit warmer than average, and hopefully for some of you, just getting the right amount of rainfall. That's all from me for today. I'll be back again tomorrow, Friday, as we take a closer look at the weekend and that chance of some narrow, heavy rain around over Monday and Tuesday of next week. So I'll see you again tomorrow.